Hello, I'm Andrew Davis of Durham University. A defence of a modest religious pluralism. Our world is full of tensions. We have ideological differences. We compete for scarce resources such as water, oil and food, historical disputes over territory and ethnic divisions. And in addition, there are many religious faiths. This can also feed divisions between people. But in this talk, I try to show why there is no need for this. Many religions believe in a supreme being or God. And by the way, I will use he throughout this talk, although I'm well aware of the discussions about gender. I could have used she, perhaps God's self, which I find a bit clumsy, so I hope you will forgive the he. So many religions believe in a supreme being or God, but they don't all describe him in the same way. They do often hold that God is other than our universe, something other than our universe, that he could exist without it, that he transcends it, that at least in some respects he differs fundamentally from anything else that exists. Some faiths think that whatever else he may be, he is also in the world, that he is immanent. For instance, Christianity is very clear about this. It believes in the incarnation, that God is in the world as Christ. Islam, on the other hand, apparently holds that God is radically transcendent. Strong exclusivists contend that other faiths don't encounter any kind of God, that whatever they may think, they fail to worship anything whatever, that other faiths are dealing with a fiction rather than a real entity, God. Softer exclusivists, sometimes called inclusivists, allow that at least some others can focus on the same God as theirs, but that these other faiths have at least some false beliefs about him. For instance, there's the thought that Christianity, Judaism and Islam are related in this fashion, that each of these deals with one and the same real being, yet each of them takes the others to be incorrect about some of the divine attributes. For example, Muslims and Jews deny the Christian incarnation doctrines. Christians may dispute the oneness of the Islamic God. Christians claim that Christ is God, while Jews reject this. Some extreme exclusivists even believe in a God who only saves some people. According to them, others lose out. As you can imagine, this attitude does not exactly breed universal love and harmony. In effect, these exclusivists believe that they are in God's business class. They maintain that many other religions are in economy. What's most extraordinary is this: they're sure that some miss the flight altogether. Surely such a deity would be totally incredible. He'd be pretty inefficient. He'd certainly not be the all-loving supreme being worshipped by a range of world faiths over the centuries. Leaving the extremists to one side, what should we make of the differences between world faiths? Are they all false? The very idea that just one of them would be right defies belief. So how could more than one of them be right? If we despair at this point, I think we forget something really important. We can only think or describe a transcendent God in limited ways. Over the centuries, great minds have pondered this issue. Consider this crude analogy to illustrate our position here. Suppose I am at the top of a hill with a friend. We gaze at an old castle some distance away. A national border lies between us and the castle. We are forbidden to cross the border in order to visit the castle. My friend wears spectacles. They aren't bad, but he really does need some new lenses soon. Neither of us can see the castle properly. We talk to each other about what we see. I say it has 2 towers, but my friend says it has one and that there is a kind of shadow effect to one side. In fact, we will suppose neither of our descriptions is accurate. Moreover, they conflict with each other. But we are certainly talking together about the same thing. Of course, this analogy is imperfect. If the border restrictions were lifted, then my friend and I could walk up to the castle and check whether either of us is right. Yet the border restrictions between people and a transcendent supreme being could not be lifted. Even so, the analogy makes its point. We cannot speak or even think with comprehensive accuracy about transcendent divinity. This is a necessary limitation. Our ways of talking about him don't necessarily exclude all the others that differ from ours, because neither our words nor theirs are capable of mapping the divine with precision and completeness. At this point, my opponent may sigh wearily. Oh, great! Suppose there's a faith whose God enjoins its members to throw virgins into a nearby volcano. Then, according to you, they still could be worshipping the same God as you are. How ridiculous a reductio ad absurdum of your position. I think that's a bit of a caricature of what I'm saying. Yes, faiths use a variety of divine descriptions, but let's cultivate some humility about this. Yes, in extreme cases it may be pretty clear that a cult is beyond the pale, so to speak, that it isn't engaged with anything that has the faintest chance of being my God. However, such extreme instances to one side, the point remains, the diversity of divine descriptions may sometimes be less of a problem than they seem. Don't rush to judgment about other faiths. Now to my next topic, and it really is a very well-worn one. Many words used about God are not to be taken literally. Now, why is that? Suppose we say God is a person. Taking this literally implies that he has features that we can have too. Be that as it may, he must also have some features that we cannot have as such. Otherwise, he would not be that transcendent divine being worthy of ultimate regard, respect and love. He would not be beyond us and radically mysterious. Yet we also still want to speak of these mysterious and transcendent features. So we might think that's fine. We must talk of these special features sometimes, but not in literal language. And surely that's what's happened down the centuries. Now, some worry that this kind of non-literal talk about God gives something with one hand and then takes it back with the other. They'd explain their worry by using an example such as God is a rock. Surely they'd complain, when we say this, we don't mean that he is a rock like those in my local river. He's not made of granite. He's not really a rock. But, they might continue, our non-literal talk of God cannot all be just like the rock case. We want to be able to say something about God's mystery and transcendence. Of course, our capacity to do so is limited, but we don't want to be restricted to saying things that we are obliged to withdraw when taken too seriously. Limits of language are one thing, but we don't want all our language to resemble the rock example when we attempt to capture aspects of transcendence. We want to insist that our language can sometimes capture elements of transcendence in some way. So what can we do with this situation? We have a problem. Here's the solution. We don't have to see all the non-literal language about God as resembling our rock example. After all, when we do use mere metaphor or figurative language, we sometimes still succeed in capturing something significant. Let's move away from religious language for a moment and consider an everyday example. She is hot-tempered. Well, she really is. Hot conveys something vital here. This is so even though it is metaphorical. It's certainly not literal. When she is in a bad temper, her physical temperature doesn't rise. She doesn't catch fire, and so on. Many metaphors embody profound and important truths and cannot be dispensed with. A good deal of our language about mental states, psychological processes, and a whole variety of abstractions cannot manage without such metaphors. It was a hard decision. She has a warm personality. His reasoning was opaque. I am under a lot of pressure just now. His tone was icy. I am trying to pull myself together. His heart sank. These compare items, e.g., voice tone and ice. Voice tone and ice just aren't literally comparable. They cannot literally share the properties of ice. So, non-literal language can still be used to say significant things. Much transcendence language has to be non-literal. I am arguing that this does not stop it saying significant things about God. Now, we have apparently conflicting divine descriptions across different religions. Yet, once we see them as non-literal, the apparent tensions may be resolved. Consider some non-religious examples. He spoke bluntly. He made some penetrating comments. As the light grew, he could see her brow darkening. Time grows short. I can't hear you when you shout. I close my eyes so I can see. Deep down, you're really shallow. So, plenty of divine descriptions seem to divide one faith from another. God is one. There are 3 persons in the Trinity. God is wholly other. God is both transcendent and immanent. These are attempts to speak of the transcendent. The apparent tensions are stark. But we should hesitate before pronouncing definitively that they cannot be reconciled in some way, because the language isn't literal. I can readily imagine a hostile response to all this. You talk of metaphor and figurative language more generally, I will be told, but don't try to kid us that there's no conflict between, say, Christian and Islamic ways of viewing God. Well, as I said earlier, just try not to rush to judgment. Let's strive for attitudes of humility if we're trying to grasp other faiths from the perspective of our own. Don't assume there must be fundamental and irresolvable conflict just because our divine descriptions and concepts sometimes seem to clash. And please do not confuse my moderate counsel with woolly and dangerous suggestions that all have roots to God, no matter what kind of God they come up with. In disputes between faiths, each side yearns for their language to capture God accurately. Each side wants to exclude what they regard as wrong-headed beliefs held by others. But yearning cannot transcend transcendence. One last point. If a Christian says that God loves us, this is connected with her belief that Christ is God in the world, that God is a person, and many other things. If a Muslim says this, it is connected with her idea that Allah is utterly transcendent. For the Jew, it may be connected with the idea that God is not incarnate. So I can't simply compare one for one beliefs which are embedded within different faiths. Each belief's content depends, in part, on its links to other beliefs of that faith. To sum up, ideas about God vary from one faith to another. This does not imply that at best only one faith has the right ideas, let alone does it imply that possibly none have. Nor does this variety of divine ideas imply that the properties of any one faith's God differ comprehensively from those of the God worshipped by others. We should be content with our talk about God and with the talk of others, even where our descriptions may differ on the surface. This is so even where our talk can appear to exclude theirs. So, rejoice in your faith and be humble about others. Thank you for listening.